Assassin's Creed is one of those projects that doesn't come along very often. Millions and millions and millions of people played this game, and I thought, well, there's got to be some great hook here that could be made into a movie.
From the get-go, when we first thought of the license, we had in mind at some point coming to the silver screen. So the way the franchise was built was meant to be easily transported to the cinema.
It was a big challenge because adaptation of video games into movie was not always a success. And the choices we have made as far as Michael Fassbender, as far as Marion Cotillard, of course, just encouraged all the director. Even if they didn't know the game at the beginning, they embraced the universe.
I wouldn't be doing the job if it wasn't for Michael. I mean, just come off the experience of Macbeth, working with him as an actor, and I think both Michael and I just felt really keen to work together again. Michael said, have you heard about Assassin's Creed? And, you know, I've been involved in developing it for the last 3 years, and would you be interested in it? And I kind of thought, wow, to be able to do a film of this sort of scale and size about this sort of subject matter with an actor like Michael, who's also a producer in it, I just sort of didn't quite understand why I wouldn't. Michael started talking to me about the concept and the idea of people being sort of defined by the legacy of those that have come before them, and how we're kind of made up of the experiences of our ancestors. And I found that really interesting and thought it was quite a unique kind of cinematic idea.
You're living proof of the link between heredity and crime.
How did you find me?
We found Aguilar,
Who's Aguilar?
your ancestor.
And then it was only sort of after being seduced by that concept that I was kind of opened up to the world by Ubisoft, being taken through each of the games, being introduced to the people that originated the idea in the game, and also John Julian from Ubisoft. It was really their energy, you know, and passion in it too that also got me excited by it.
You're about to enter the Animus. Commence regression.
It was very important for us to find something original outside of the games in terms of the characters in our story piece and our regression, and really respecting the rules of the Animus and using that to its full potential.
The Animus in the game is a kind of chair that transports you back into the particular time. So it's kind of like, well, is that going to be cinematic and interesting enough to put on screen? And that's when we started playing around with the idea of virtual reality and maybe being influenced by virtual reality for the experience of the Animus.
We developed our own version of the Animus, which allows it to be more of an interactive experience for the person that is regressing.
What is this?
You're about to enter the Animus. What you're about to see, hear, and feel are the memories of someone who's been dead for 500 years.
What do you want from me?
Your past.
The concept of assassins and Templars battling through the centuries just seemed like something that would lend itself very nicely to a cinematic experience.
The party's just getting started.
Michael's one of those rare actors who is able to have the most extraordinary emotional range, but is also physically incredibly capable. He's playing two characters. He's getting hurt and pummeled every day. You know, there's very few actors that can kind of do that. Can get on a horse and ride at extreme speeds, can jump off a building, brilliant at fighting with a sword. He's quite amazing in that sense. We had an incredible fight choreographer, Thomas and Ben, that were both working with Michael directly.
He's involved heavily in the action. We have a lot of rehearsal time with him to really try and hit the notes.
There was a lot of training every morning, just sort of conditioning, strengthening, and then working with stunts. There's all sorts of techniques in there, moments of jiu-jitsu. You want there to be an element of messiness, nastiness there.
I like the fact that you can just feel there's effort to it. People are exhausted by it. You can see the strain. So that's something I didn't want to shy away from. I didn't want it to always be perfect.
So, you know, everybody involved wanted to have that feel. So you can almost sort of taste the sweat and the blood, you know, the sort of real effort that went into the physical pieces of the film. Ariane Labad, who's fantastic. She plays Maria. That is the great thing with working with somebody going through that experience. The weather was intense, the material was intense, So yeah, we became very close, you know, very quickly. We had that shorthand, we understood each other, and we could just sort of get on with getting the work done.
She's got a kick that could stop a steam train.
Yeah, I could never imagine I would be doing stuff like that in my life ever. And it's very exciting, all this stunt and all this kind of energy that I have to find. It's very intense, but yeah, it's a pure joy.
We wanted to bring something fresh and new in terms of introducing new characters.
It's a group of assassins working together, so you see the brotherhood, you know, it's exciting, you know, and they all have their own flavour as well.
They call me Musa, but my name is Baptiste. And I'm completely out of my comfort zone with Musa. It's a huge stretch coming from a very dark.
I knew that the imagery of Assassin's Creed, the game, you can't ignore, and I think it's so cinematic. So we're always being influenced by the look of the game with the story. The big question was, what is humanly achievable that you can build, create, express for real that is done digitally within a game?
When you look at those characters throughout the games, from a costume point of view, we've made our version of them as close to what Ubisoft would like and made them as real as possible, basically. The ones in the game, they're beautifully designed. They use the period that they're set in very well. It's a very kind of clear point of reference. So we wanted to make distinct differences in the groups using colour and texture and shape. So you knew this is the Templar world, and you know this is the Assassin world, and you know this is Abstergo.
And they're beautiful. They feel character-driven, and they feel real, and they feel historical. They don't feel appropriation. So that was important. I think with all the period costumes, it was about really getting that detail kind of right so that you believed in it.
Coming up with an Aguilar that you believe is the right manifestation for Assassin's Creed fans is difficult to do. And essentially what you do is you just make the most incredible costume that you can make.
That was our first costume, and we wanted Aguilar to feel not just Spanish. He needed to feel like he was very nomadic, travelled a lot, was worldly wise.
I kind of wanted to feel as though they came from an environment. You could tell where they were sort of made. I wanted costumes that were, you know, had real interesting Middle Eastern materials, had real beading, charms and stuff. You just could feel the assassins were picking things up and were like kind of gypsies and collecting things and were kind of travellers.
Por el credo.
The reason the decoration is there is from a historical, ancestral root, and not just to make it decorative. It needs to mean something. So all the amulets they've got and all the workings is all worked out to have significance for that character.
Where'd you get this?
It's your mother's necklace. I wanted you to have it.
At the end, it is a film about a game, and so there are things in the game that if you made them in reality, they wouldn't actually work on a body. So those kind of things you have to bear in mind when you're doing an action film.
Everyone set, and action.
A lot of those costumes in the game wouldn't have translated that well to a living person running around in it, because a lot of the times what can look good can just be very uncomfortable. And although it was hot, it was very important for us to have clothing that doesn't restrict what we're doing in terms of parkour and physical movement-wise. The boots were actually runners and
Well, the exciting thing I think about Assassin's Creed is that we go back in time, just as when the Assassin's Creed game, it goes back to these periods in which they inhabit them completely. The attention to detail, the recreation of previous time periods, we really went out of our way in order to do the best possible job that we could to make you feel that you are alive in that world.
Something that's important to the story, and I think to the global reach of the audience, is the different places we go. We're trying to ground this in a way that's not a fantasy movie by going to real locations, going to different countries where the action and the story takes place, so we're not relying on visual effects to create the world. We're going to the real world to shoot the movie.
When we set out to make the movie, we knew that we needed some place in which we could recreate 15th century Spain.
Roll, please. 3, 2, 1, action!
We chose Malta after looking all over Europe. There are very few places in the world that still work for the 15th century, and Malta had vast areas that worked just as they were.
We started the shoot off in Malta, which was really hot. I just sort of have flashbacks of wearing that suit in the heat there, but fantastic. It's hot, sweaty.
Action!
I'm just trying to keep up with her. We filmed around Valletta, the old town in Malta. So, you know, all the action sequences take part in that wonderful ancient town.
We shot in Valletta because we knew we were able to do a lot of these parkour sequences for real off buildings that reflected some of the architecture that would have been there in Seville in 15th century Spain.
Because Valletta is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, we had to get structural reports on all the buildings that we were on. All the buildings are extremely old, and especially up in the bell towers, trying to put all of the truss work in. Some of them are for stunt rigs and wire rigs, and some of them are for camera rigs. Each one has to be treated the same way, with care and respect, as we're in one of the oldest cities in the whole of Europe.
So we're running along the roofs where, you know, the jumps are happening. Fights are happening on the rooftops there. That really was a great way to start the film because that's kind of where we wanted to go from. In an era where there's a lot of CGI in these kind of films, we wanted to have as much old school, real location shoots as possible.
You just...
We work in the darkness to serve the light.
We are assassins.
I do try to make the films feel very visceral and feel like you're kind of breathing with them a little. I kind of wanted those action sequences in this to feel like you were close to the assassins and that you were kind of really in their footsteps as they were sort of engaged and attempting these kind of extraordinary physical feats. So that it just didn't feel like you're an observer and watching it from afar, but that you actually sort of felt the pulse and the spirit of them.
As far as action goes, we have a little bit of everything. We have action that takes place in present day, and we have action that takes place in the past.
The action sequences are heavily based on the ideas of flight, which are connected to the assassins. So we wanted to kind of put cameras on, you know, wires and travel them across the stunt guys and really get that sense of flight, use lots of drones, use lots of helicopters, really try to physically do that so that it all felt very visceral and grounded.
3, 2, 1, action!
A lot of our inspiration came from real parkour artists. One of the first ones was Damien Walters, and some of his YouTube clips were just extraordinary in terms of physically what he could pull off. So straight away we got Damien, and he became a spirit and an energy of like how you pull this stuff off for real.
When the game first came out, I thought it was the best thing I've ever seen. It's just a very nice opportunity to, you know, be given that shot to perform your skills on a game that you're a big fan of. You know, it's not many people get to do that. We're going to do the leap off the top of the church, and hopefully we sort of turn in towards camera and throw in a dagger straight towards camera. Everyone else seems happy, so they're happy, I'm happy, eh?
It's a big action movie. And you know, we do a lot of rehearsal time. We're constantly working and coming up with stuff and shooting and prepping and shooting and prepping. The stunt team is trying to see in camera people doing physical performances that are second to none. I've got some of the best parkour exponents the world has to offer.
Yeah!
We are trying to put the slacklining our sport in the scene, figuring out how to use the slacklining in a creative way and how we can use it in different ways.
The idea is to get from one rooftop to another. So we need to use slacklines to make some creative moves and get some cool transfers and really cool flips.